throughout the day, and all our sessions were packed. Like yesterday, what we will do in the plenary session is now we would have one keynote presentation by Professor Tushaar Shah, followed by our custodians. Today we had 8 parallel sessions. So our 8 custodians will come and briefly provide what happened in their sessions, a high-level update, followed by a panel discussion like yesterday, what we will ask some of our panelists about the highlights and their suggestions for what we can do in the round 2. So with that, may I invite Professor Tushaar Shah, who is a emeritus scientist at the International Water Management Institute and has done the most groundbreaking work on groundwater that's ever been done. So please, Tushaar.
Thank you, Aditi, and good afternoon. This one. Okay, so I think we've had 2 days of very intensive discussions on some very carefully carried out research, very rigorous research. This is the last session, and I thought one thing we could do is that we have had this nearly 10 years of experience with promoting solar irrigation pumps, and there are some very broad trends that that we need to look at and consider, and think about what exactly do they imply. So I just want to do some of that in the next 10 or 15 minutes. Most of the solar activity that we see in the irrigation field is basically the work that has been done in the last 10 years. As you can see, between 1992 and 2015, the number of solar irrigation pumps in India increased from 0 to about 11,000. But out of these 11,600, 90% were actually done in the last 2 years, that is 2013, 14, and 15. So essentially, it's a story of 10 years, and we now have a decade of experience. And it's kind of time to take stock of what are the lessons in that. Now, I think one thing that that kind of strikes, I and people in the IMI program, we have stayed with the evolution of the solar pump economy in India since the beginning, since 2010s. And at that time, there were a certain number of beliefs that drove the design of policies. And I think 3 of those beliefs were these. They were actually, there was no evidence. These were more in nature of hypotheses, but they were very widely accepted hypotheses. So one was that for smallholders in Ganga Basin, water abundant areas with massive concentration of rural poverty, who are hassled by diesel prices, for them SIPs and SIP-led water markets will be a huge lift. So this would apply to Nepal, Tarai, and to Bangladesh, where water is not exactly in short supply, but energy is. And that is a major concern for farmers. Second, thanks to the solar pumps' marginal cost of use being 0 and availability of daytime power, there was a risk that solar irrigation pumps will tend to be overused, and they would tend to stress aquifers, especially in arid and semi-arid Western India or Western South Asia and the hard rock geographies. And the third was that by giving away SIPs in lieu of grid power connections, electricity industry could actually tackle the problem of subsidies in India that kind of bedevil the finances of this entire sector. So these 3 beliefs have actually driven by far the most important policies that have promoted promoted solar pumps in India. It's nearly 10 years since these have been kind of running the show. And now we have enough evidence to, at least first level evidence, to examine whether these assumptions or these hypotheses had any merit in them or not. So if you look at, at that time, if you look at tube bill according to the energy source and tariff regime, then you had information from a variety of sources. you had Aditi's work in West Bengal, for her doctoral work, where she studied electric tube wells, which are paying very high, actually among the highest flat tariff in India. And the operators of this tube well were under special economic pressures. And they operated, I think, something like 1,500 to 2,500 hours a year. Then there were low flat tariff tube wells in Gujarat, and they operate even today. They operate around 1,800 to 2,400 hours a year. And that is the case even today. Then there are metered grid power connections in Gujarat, which operate about 700 to 900. Then there are free power connections in Punjab and elsewhere, which also operate around 600 to 900 hours. And there were diesel pumps everywhere, which operated the list about 500, 550 hours. Now, this information basically provided the basis for making some prognosis about how solar pumps might behave, because solar pumps have some similar characteristic as the flat power tariff connection. In that they have zero marginal cost, and it was based on that. Okay. Right. So then there has been a significant amount of research, empirical research, which actually shows whether some of these hypotheses or beliefs turned out to be true or not. Earliest among that was Ishita Gupta's research in Rajasthan, which showed that SIP users use more groundwater than diesel tube well owners do. IWMI surveys, some of which were presented in this meeting, show that there is really no significant difference either way. I mean, there are some surveys which show that SIP users use more groundwater. Some others show that they didn't really use all that much more. But there is no trend that there is a significant difference in energy use by SIP owners versus other owners, in other pump owners, in the use of energy in pumping groundwater. There is a CEW survey, I think 3-4 years ago, which identified a new concern, which is that just less than a third of the energy generated by solar pumps is actually being used. Now there are more surveys or more studies which show that underutilization is more critical problem than overexploitation of groundwater. So it calls, thing in Bangladesh, low CUF is a big issue. There is a big 1,000 solar pump KPMG GIZ study, which also shows that utilization of solar pumps is far less than was earlier expected. And that it tends to be higher, significantly higher, in dry or more or semi-arid states with larger farm size and lower groundwater levels like Rajasthan and Tamil Nadu. Then it is in states like Uttar Pradesh, which are kind of flush with groundwater, and Orissa, coastal Orissa, which again has a lot of groundwater. So in the later areas, the utilization of pumps is much lower than it is in Tamil Nadu and Rajasthan. In the surveys in Bangladesh and Nepal, some of which are presented here, they also show that this SIP is operating for more than 1,000 hours a year. It's a very rare occurrence. You find SIP is operating around 300, 400, 500 hours, 600 hours. In Nepal, we had 750 hours, but 1,000 hours or more is just very, very rare. One place where we find them is in some villages in Bihar, where IWMI did some experimental work. So I think overall situation that we have today, after 10 years of evidence, is that we have this high, electric pumps, but the SIPs in Western India, their operation is no different from the diesel pumps. They operate for about 600 to 750 hours. SIPs in Bihar and coastal Orissa, which actually have scope to pump more, there the operating factor is still lower, between 300 and 600 hours a year. In tribal areas, in Jharkhand and Western Orissa, where they do most good, the SIP operating levels are the least, 150 to 250 hours. Now at 200 hours a year, a solar irrigation pump becomes an economic disaster, as Dan mentioned yesterday, and many other people have. So operating factor becomes a very, very important factor that decides whether SIPs are an economically viable proposition or not. 10 years ago, when the SIP boom started, nobody worried about this. Everybody thought that underutilization would not be among the problems that SIPs face. But today, this is a big reality. So one thing that the phase 2 of this project can actually look at is under what situations do SIPs achieve economically practical operating factor. So there, I think there are already some ideas are available. You should avoid too small pumps, 1 and 2 kilowatt pumps typically have lower operating factor. Too large pumps larger than 7.5, they also have tend to have a low operating factor. So something around 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5 becomes an ideal factor. In hyperactive water markets, village water markets, SIPs tend to have a better operating factor. SIP owners who have buried pipe networks, they are able to achieve at least 200, 250 hours more operating hours than SIP owners who use delivery pipes. Vegetable villages provide higher operating factor than field crop villages, where summer water security is ensured. There again, because this is where the SIPs operate the most, between March or February and June is the period when SIPs do most business. So at that time, if there is no water, then the operating factor gets affected. And in Bihar and in Nepal, the presence of large numbers of single phase, small 2 or 3 HP electric tube wells, they can just finish off solar pumps. In Bihar, everywhere else, state electricity utilities are using solar pump subsidies to cut down grid power subsidies, to reduce grid power subsidies. But in Bihar and in many other eastern states, governments are using, or electricity utilities are using electricity subsidies that actually drive out solar pumps. So in many villages of Bihar, we found, where we were doing some field work, we found that wherever you had these small single phase electric pumps, diesel pumps just had no way to op. So one place where we could do this is where IWMI tried out an idea where we created a financing mechanism in which the solar pump owners had to pay for the full investment cost in installments over 5 years. So they were under pressure to generate cash income, and that actually made them achieve 1,200 to 600 hours per year. And even today, they continue to operate at that level. And at that time, these electricity connections were not available. But today, if you were to go and ask farmers that, look, you take this solar irrigation pump without a subsidy, there would be hardly any takers because electricity connections are available for a song. So I think promoting solar irrigation pumps without subsidy is a big problem today, or even with reduced subsidies is a huge problem. So now we go back to those three original questions on Ganga basin. So I think a real question that we need to ask is, if it were practical, wouldn't diesel vouchers be better than giving away solar pumps? Or if we just wanted to do good to poor households, is buying and giving away a solar pump, is that the best way of spending $500,000 rupees? Are there better ways in which you can invest that money to improve the livelihoods of poor farmers? So I think that question, which 10 years ago looked like a non-starter, is very real now. Second, is there enough evidence to show that SIPs are likely to threaten or increase the stress on groundwater? The evidence so far seems to suggest that there is no such immediate threat. And number 3, are solar pumps actually saving subsidies? Is giving away a 500,000 rupee pump free to a farmer in order to save 50,000 rupees a year of subsidy? I mean, where is the saving in that? You're basically just taking away the net present value of a future flow of subsidy income and giving it away to the farmer. So there really is no effective subsidy. So all the 3 criteria based on which the solar policies, SIP policies have really been run, all of them come into question from the new evidence that has come to light. So the real issue is that the 700 megawatt of off-grid solar pump that India has installed today, if you were to compare that with solar parks, then you would find that that's the most inefficient solar pump investments that you have. We have now 4 different models of promoting solar pumps. One is Gujarat Sky, on which we have heard a great deal. Maharashtra solar feeders, Tata Power, the small microgrids, So I think the first two, they use 100% of the power that is generated, either by farmers or by the rest of the economy. In case of mini grids, 80 to 90% of the power generated gets used. But in case of off-grid pumps, less than 30% of the power that is generated gets used. The remaining 70, nobody is able to, there is no economic use for that. So how can you keep investing public money or a nation's capital into a program which actually delivers just 10 or 30% of the outcome that would normally be expected? So I think we need to rethink the architecture of the solar irrigation program. Yesterday, Pradyot talked about two things, that you have centralized generation and distributed use. That is Maharashtra solar feeders or the Tata Smart mini grids, where you have centralized generation of solar power, but the users are distributed users. The second is distributed generation, distributed use, which are off-grid SIPs, that farmers are independent, they generate power themselves. But third is decentralized generation, but decentralized and centralized use, which is DODI or the SKY program. Now, I think we need to choose, or we need to consider these three competing architectures on solar irrigation. So, as I mentioned yesterday also, that, when we created DODI, or when we created this pilot in DODI, the main consideration was to change farmers' behavior vis-a-vis the pumping of groundwater. That when farmers had zero opportunity cost energy, they are unlikely to think much about saving water. But if we were to pay farmers for saving water and power, would their behavior change? And DODI showed that it did, and SKY came out of that. But I think today we need to really look at DODI all over again and SKY. We need to look at it more as part of the distributed generation strategy. Gujarat is very high on distributed generation. It's also accepted as a goal of renewables, generating renewables in a distributed manner. So does SKY or such things, schemes like SKY, they need to be compared with other alternatives, like say rooftop solar, in which Gujarat is a national champion. And we need to consider what kind of, what would make sense. So I really think that the second phase of this project should really look back or sit back and look at some of these big ticket items. I think there is a case for making an argument that entire PM Kusum should be reconceptualized. I think it is based on assumptions which have now come into question in the light of new evidence that we have, and we should certainly go and reconfirm some of those evidence. But if there is truth in that evidence, then I think there is a need to take a total overall relook at the way PM Kusum is designed. Second, I think there is no case for subsidizing off-grid SIPs except in off-grid villages. And there are hardly any off-grid villages in India. So basically, I think there is the wisdom of such high subsidy, 90-95% subsidy, to off-grid solar pumps, which are used only at 10, 15, 20% capacity. I think that the folly of that needs to be recognized. And at present, the Kusum component that is working is actually that. Off-grid solar pumps is the main thing. The policy should recognize that SIP's irrigation role is important, but it's minor. I think all studies show that of the power energy that they generate, solar pump owners use only 30 to 35% in irrigation. The rest is either wasted or where there is an opportunity, it's evacuated. It is sold. So of the total energy that solar pump owners generate, irrigation is just a minor use. So we need to find other uses, economically productive uses for the balance of that energy. Now that leads to the idea that all SIPs should be grid connected and net meter. That is the only way in which you can make maximum use of the energy generated. So one can also argue that the objective of the new Kusum, some of this was mentioned by Ram in the morning, should, number one, to meter 19 million unmetered grid connected tube wells, which are the groundwater problem in India. By far the majority of the tube wells in India are unmetered. Only tube wells, electric tube wells in West Bengal and 500,000 tube wells in Gujarat are metered and charged based on metered consumption. Almost everywhere else, energy consumption by tube wells is unmetered. And the biggest role biggest groundwater role that SIPs can play is to get them metered. In case of SKY, one of the most important findings is that 1,800 tube wells, which are unmetered, when Sky was started, one of our major worries was that all the flat tariff connections would just refuse to join Sky. But 1,800 of them actually joined. The proportion of non-metered tube wells and proportion of metered tube wells who joined was the same. So actually Sky can be a way, or net metered grid connected solar pumps can be a way through which you can get all the tube wells metered. Second, it should be to create a farmer participatory rural power grid. And number C, it should enable farmers to earn by selling 60 to 70% of the solar generation. If you do that, then the FIT should be the major instrument of influencing farmer behavior. It should be so determined as to maximize farmer capital contribution. In Sky, for example, most of the capital was contributed by the government, but you can actually adjust the FIT to increase farmers' incentive to contribute, and also to determine the local water prices. The higher the FIT, the tighter is going to be the local water market, and the more the poor or the water buyers be at the receiving end. So in water abundant India, FIT should be lower than in water scarce India. Finally, in water stressed geographies, graduated rise in FIT should be used to disincentivize. I mean, these are ideas, hypotheses which can be actually tested, but you can do a great deal with FIT to influence the behavior of the markets as well as of the users. So then the main thing is that, I mean, we've been doing a lot of very rigorous research. But in phase 2, we should also do some of what MS Swaminathan calls anticipatory research. I mean, we've been kind of seeing where we have been coming from, where we are, and we know enough to make prognosis about where we are likely to head. I mean, everybody knows that we have 300,000 solar pumps. At this rate, in the next 5 years, we'll probably have 3 million. And in another 5-10 years, we'll have a larger number. This is what happened with unmetered electric pumps. If we had stopped them when we had only 50,000 unmetered electric pumps, then things would have been different today. But if we allow things to go like this, then we can make reasonable prognosis about what future will be like. And we can actually then provide some influence, some impact on the way the future situation shapes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Tushaar. I think most of the things you have summed out are exactly the kind of things we are finding in this phase 1. I mean, it's very clear that off-grid is not the way to go, and a lot of the pilots, I mean, at the beginning of this phase, I think all the governments were clear that they want the pilots to be grid-connected pilots. So I do think that in the next phase, there would be more role to see how exactly these feed-in tariffs play, and some of the work that we are doing in Bangladesh is actually also looking at what feed-in tariff works, and that's I think I mean, certainly. So thank you so much for summarizing and showing the bigger trends. I think that's really appreciated. With this, I would just likely to quickly call our custodians. Today we had 8 parallel sessions to come on stage and present a brief synopsis of what happened in their session.
Thanks, everyone. So I'll be reporting on session 7, where we looked at the experience of grid-connected solar irrigation in India. So there were 3 presentations on the Sky scheme, looking at it through different lenses. So the 3 main key takeaways were, first of all, the presentation from Deepak showed that due to the evacuation-based incentive, groundwater extraction has not gone up for Sky farmers, whereas it has gone up in non-Sky farmers. So it has a positive impact in terms of groundwater abstraction, the evacuation incentive that they're getting. But there has been a large important implication in the informal water market. So farmers did not realize that many of them were net consumers and they have to pay bills. So that sort of influenced the increased water rates. After 3 years, many have reduced. There are more thoughts on reducing the bill, so better upkeep of the panels, reduced water selling, restricting only within closed networks. And another presentation that highlighted the need for capacity building to address the ground level complexities of Sky implementation, especially in terms of explaining the financial system, that the 60% subsidy, and then the evacuation-based incentive that was part of the Sky scheme, and also the operational requirement of these systems. So Jeremy with IWMI has done the training on that, which have led to developed understanding of the subsidy regime and the technical parts and operations of these SIP systems. There was another presentation from Anjali from ETRI on agent-based modeling to see how the response of solar irrigation through different scenarios. And what they find is that neither rationing nor pricing regime guarantees groundwater sustainability. And then we also looked at the experience from Maharashtra on a feeder level, solarization through feeder level plants. And some of the notable outcomes of the schemes were voltage quality improvement, reduction in T&D losses, supply improved to farmers from supply improved, and there was lower load sharings. But there are also costs, constraints on expansion due to costs, and mostly due to cost. So thanks. Yeah.
Eight games before 9. So I was in the session on number 8, so leveraging solar irrigation potential in Africa. So we were presented with 4 presentations and with together cases from 3 countries, Senegal, Ethiopia, and South Africa. And it was really about what do we learn from those cases to leverage solar irrigation in sub-Saharan Africa. So I just synthesized the very rich conversation that we had into 3 categories in terms of the opportunities. We all understood that there is a high potential for expanding solar irrigation and responding to the climate change challenges in Africa, and that solar irrigation would be a response to those challenges. And that's specifically the case in off-grid areas in the context of the low electrification rate in sub-Saharan Africa. In terms of the strengths, we talk about the political will is there. We heard that in all the 3 countries, government are aware and are ready to put policies in place and finance as well in place to expand solar irrigation. And for that, we have already seen some support in terms of change on the policies, for example, with the no import tax on solar irrigation equipment in Senegal and in Ethiopia. This being said, there is quite a long list of weaknesses that we still see and that we discuss. Issues around the collaboration among the actors in the value chain of the solar irrigation, still limiting knowledge and awareness from the farmers, access to the extension services, absence of quality standards. Some business models are existing, but in many cases, those are not very context specific. So that's also another weakness. Access to credit and to finance, it has been repeated, but it's still there. Value chain on the crop, so the crop value chains and the market access for the higher value crop, issues around land tenure and security, issues around equity on who is adopting and who is likely to adopt, and the distributional impact once SIPs are implemented. And then we also discuss about the governance issues and the community buying, with, for example, the case of South Africa and vandalism on some of the SIPs. So a lot of weaknesses, a lot of work to work on, but that was very interesting discussion.
I'm clearly about to explode. So, okay, I'm going to quickly finish this off. So we had 2 or 3 major points. We were looking at in session 9 about how solar irrigation might have implications for groundwater extraction. So some of the takeaways was that there's a very high variance between the relationship between, so irrigation consumption, energy consumption and groundwater extraction. Hydrogeology can play a very major role. In these variations, there are other aspects such as bore well depth, age of the pump, etc. So clearly, we don't have a very simple relationship between that, and therefore it needs to be studied more, and we need to have better understanding. Although the panel discussion had some really interesting debates around modeling versus, field-based analysis, which essentially brought out the need to complement these rich data sets and models with more ground truthing, especially given groundwater situations, which are so varied, the contexts are, otherwise models can be misleading. So we really need to be grounded as well. We also talked about cheaper data collection methods for assessing water volumes, because that is something that is so often missing. Surprisingly, from groundwater studies, it's all about depth. It's, we never actually get to volumetric understanding of water extraction, and therefore we need to have more data sources for that, because just data collection is really expensive, which is why we never go around to that. And finally, we had an interesting point that in the social sciences, it's almost like, if people in hydrogeology crying about poor data, in social sciences, we don't even have, these basic rules of social behavior and relations established to have adequate explanatory capacity for modeling. And therefore, we can think about, sort of varied methods. So how far modeling can really provide you all of the solutions and answers to groundwater use varies across the kinds of questions that you ask. So that's it for me.
In the session 10, I think we had three presentations from three different regions of the world. Vinay from the ICARDA presented about the core of the presentation about the low load pressure drip irrigation system. But for solar, I think the main point was this low pressure drip can save around 20% or 20% of the energy. So the places which are looking to combine solar plus drip, where the solar pump itself and solar panel itself has contributed a major part of the capital, this has great potential there. So if with these drip system, you can remove, I think, reduce the capital cost. I think this was followed by a presentation from IWMI colleague Jafar from Uzbekistan, talking about how the Central Asia is still, I think South Asia, he talked about South Asia is still quite ahead of where Central Asia is currently right now. But there has been a recent focus to increase solar deployment along with efficient irrigation systems. So I think there is a big opportunity for South-South, or you can say South or South Central Asia cooperation, South Asia, what we have already learned from this project from 10 years, what Tushaar said, what those lessons can be transferred to Central Asia part, which are just starting on their journey. Post that, I think IWMI colleagues from Ghana have been presented about the potential of solar and the modality of promoting solar irrigation in Western Africa. And where they talked about, they're not just focusing on providing solar pump, it's more about bundling solar pumps along with the farmers' need, be it solar plus drip, be it solar plus seeds, solar plus market. So it's about realizing the complete total potential of solar, which alone providing solar pumps won't work. So again, I think these three learnings, again, they were learning within the session, but for the broader, how we take it forward. I think that was followed by a very interesting panel discussion where she started with the case of these poppy growers in Afghanistan who without any project have adopted solar. So what lessons that has for the other countries? What are the barriers of adoptions we should be tackling? Is it finance? It is subsidies? We had interesting debate about community solar versus individual solar. I couldn't capture all, but yeah, very interesting discussions. I've given the presenters' names, so please get in touch with them if you want to just know more about that. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to quickly go through the highlights for the session, Our Energy Policies in South Asia, Gender Transformative. There were 4 presentations looking at GESI, which is Gender Equality and Social Inclusion in SIP-related programs, and in WEF policies, which is the Water, Energy, Food policies in Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. And then there was a further deeper study on GESI and energy policies for Nepal. So overall, all of the policies focused on how irrigation is slowly turning towards the woman's farm workload, but it is still seen as a predominantly male task. And SIP-related policies have not been able to target smallholders, poorer and marginal farmers, and women in Nepal and Bangladesh, predominantly because they do not have targeted subsidies and provide flat subsidies, for example, in the case of Nepal. Overall, food-related policies seem to be more GESI sensitive than water and energy policies. in the case of Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. And energy overall performs poorly in terms of inclusion and seems to often reinforce gender stereotypes. So for example, if there is a mention of gender, it will only be in equation to women. And if women are mentioned, then it will only be in equation to clean cooking. So these certain kind of domestic gender stereotypes are being reinforced by energy, and they are not really looking at the more productive use that it could be enabled for women farmers. Overall, there is a limited understanding of what gender itself means. As I was saying, only conceptualized in the terms of gender meaning women. And targeted programs and justice sensitive policies was the discussion for changing the status of women and marginalized men. For instance, one of the projects discussed was the IMI ACIR IDE project, which specifically targeted Dalit marginalized farmers with small SIPs, and it was successful in improving their livelihood options. And moving forward, we need to go with a broader understanding of what gender means. So not equating just women, but understanding that it is the power relations between men and women, which subjugates certain men and women to a lower position. And using this lens to design these policies and programs henceforth to empower targeted farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Labisha. Good evening, everyone. Okay, session 12, we basically presented IMI Solar's work based around grid-connected solar irrigation. So in presentation 1, Motin from IDCOL, they presented the grid integration work in Bangladesh. And basically the gist of the presentation was, solar irrigation is cheaper than diesel, but like electricity is even more cheaper. But how do we make, what happens when we connect these off-grid large solar irrigation pump to grid? So basically the key factor here is if we have a tariff, feed-in tariff of 8.5 Bangladeshi taka, then it will be the whole financial model will work, and the payback period of would remain as same as the previous off-grid solar irrigation pumps. So his second presentation was done by me. I was presenting Nepal's work. We basically was sharing the experience in implementing this microgrid pilot that we have. So specific policy for grid integration of solar irrigation pumps needs to be established. So right now we have only policies around rooftop solar integration and net metering, things like that. So that would not work for solar irrigation pumps. And local government are the ones who are in place to implement this, or to when we move ahead and scale this grid connected solar irrigation. But the main player in Nepal is NEA, because they are the only one utility service provider. So when you're talking about grid, they need to be onboarded. So presentation 3 was done by our colleague, Dr. Deepak Bhasne. So basically the uptake of solar Sky app and the performance of the solar farmers, the performance ratio of the solar farmers are pretty low, which highlighted the need of capacity buildings for the farmers there. And identifying technical network or other related issues are key to address them, to rectify them in a short quick timeline. And we have a very knowledgeable panel discussion, which was around challenges of grid-connected solar irrigation and what are the lessons from Gujarat's Sky scheme. So we have panelists from RJ Bala from PBBCL, Mr. Lakshman Gimire from AEPC, and Sakil from BREB, and Martin from IDCOL, and Divya Sharma from NEA. So basically the discussion was looking at the opportunities and challenges. We need to break the gist of the discussion. We need to break down the challenges into what are the technical challenges and what are the technical opportunities, and what are the financial, breaking that into financial and then social, and then what are the policy level implementation that we need to be implemented at, because all the 3 countries are at different stages, and like 3 countries might have like different issue to address. Thank you.
So hello everyone. The technical session 13 looked at integrating renewable energy in agriculture value chains. So we first heard from the presentations from developing countries where we looked at the ongoing work in Senegal, East Africa and Cambodia. And then we had a panel discussion to see how the challenges are for DRE integration in the agriculture value chain. So the key takeaways for this session was that looking and analyzing the whole value chain to design sustainable technical and financial decentralized energy solution for livelihood is important, because compared to the health sector, where the standardization is possible, in agriculture value chain, we need a lot of customization since a lot of stakeholders are involved in the process. Then there's a Haryali Village program by Seva, which looks at how the technology is adopted, piloted, and thereafter the scaling up of innovative technologies takes place. So Haryali villages or green villages, as they are known, has all the RE equipments, and thus integrating them is important rather than the standalone scaling of them. Fourthly, monitoring parameters like community participation in designing the technology to understand the aspirations of the community for their demand for electricity, and in addition to tariff collection and ownership management is important from monitoring and evaluation purposes. And lastly, scaling up must happen through bottom-up understanding and focusing on value chain approach. And income is realized only when value chain approach is taken. Thank you.
So I can show you slides. So slides were blank, but discussions were not. And it was the final session slide. So the session was about monitoring of PM Kusum scheme around that. So there was a presentation on the how the monitoring portal being developed to monitor the implementation of the scheme at central level and at state level, how different portals are talking to each other, getting data, and how this monitoring scheme, monitoring portal is actually helping in both implementing the project, and it's a part of the business in MNI side, like based on that ministry is releasing funds, CFAs and all, and how this kind of data is being analyzed for betterment of the scheme and also other policy interventions. So the next presentation was on that utilization of pumps. We already are discussing here, like especially in the PM Kusum scheme, the utilization is very, very less, around 10 to 13%. So what different ways like can be for utilizing the pumps up to a maximum level, and there is a component called USPC, Universal Solar Pump Controller. So how that component can benefit the farmers while utilizing whatever amount has been gone into, because the subsidy driven program. So that will be actually utilizing the exchequer's money, and also the location where they are already energy deprived. So what kind of different application, be it atta chakki, be it soft cutter, sprayer, cow dung machine, your so any kind of electrical appliances which is compatible technically can be connected both single phase and three phase. So USPC is a solution, but also there is a constraints, like while you are providing subsidy for USPC, so you have to be very careful in targeting the farmers. Otherwise, if they are not aware what is the benefit of the USPC, and if he don't know, and if he doesn't have this kind of applications, even he know the benefits, so probably the intended purpose of USPC cannot be cannot be made. So that is one session on USPC. Then Mr. Soviet from ministry had joined virtually to share his learnings in implementing the scheme, and what are different challenges he faced, what is the targets for MNRE, and what kind of different kind of flexibility has been given into the scheme while navigating through the scheme throughout these years. Like, for example, component C, it was 1.5 million. Now they have made it more number of sanctions, because in some component demands are less and some component demands are more. So being within the same allocated fund of around 34,000 crores, how this can be utilized within the component. So that learnings has been shared, and also he was sharing how the ministries are getting benefited through the portal by monitoring it, by tracking different kind of an application, different sanctioning at state level. So he was sharing his experiences. Then we have the moderation session, a panel discussion where experiences has been shared both from Nepal and Bangladesh, from APC and IDCOL. So they are also doing monitoring, not at large scale, but as of now, they are doing, especially in Bangladesh, they are doing a little bit larger scale, around 40 kilowatt of solar panel and 25 kilowatt of pumps. They are connected, they're utilizing especially for community purposes, and they're also monitoring it and thinking of going for grid connection systems. Same has been shared by Nepal, that they're doing monitoring and different parameters have been captured for that. And they're also thinking of going for grid connection and like more number of pumps. So that was the overall summary of the session. Thank you. Sorry for not being having a slide over here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before calling Aditi back, I really want to thank all the custodians, chairs, and rapporteurs for taking on the responsibility for the session. I'm sorry for being the villain of delegating work to everyone and sending 2 a.m. emails with 20 bullet points. No more. Thank you. Back to Aditi. I think I can stop sharing. Yeah, this is fine. This is the title. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shreya, and thank you so much, rapporteurs. I think we are just about to finish another maybe 20 minutes or so. I just wanted to, like yesterday, call a panel to share their experience and key takeaways from today and tell us what are the worthwhile questions to look for next in the next phase. And I wanted to invite Mr. P.C. Sharma. Please, sir, be on stage. Mr. Mohammad Enamul Karim Pavel from IDCOL. P.C. Sharma ji is from ISA. Shifiro from GGGI. William Panela from Zoneful Energy Zimbabwe. And Marie Jean Gabriel from Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, South Africa. Yeah. Thank you so much, panelists. I think one of our objective of making this, because a lot of the research presented was from the region, the solar project is regional, but then we realized while preparing for this meeting that it would be actually worthwhile to right now to start the South-South conversation, because we know there's a lot of work going on in Africa. So we were actually very lucky to get our delegation from various countries in Africa who kindly came and shared their knowledge with us during these 2 days meeting. So to you, each of you, I have the same question, as in what was your key insight key takeaway that you are taking away from today's and yesterday's session, followed by if we were to do a similar work with you in the future, what would that, the key highlight of that work be? So maybe I can start with Mr. William. I believe you represent a private sector. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Need microphone? Can you see?
Thank you very much. From my side, I've learned 3 important aspects from this forum. The first important aspect is to do with what we need to do if we are to have success in the solar irrigation systems. I think the issue of hydrological surveys and capacity testing on the water sources is very important, so that when the pumps are being bought, the farmers would buy proper sized pumps so that they don't really deplete the water tables. And also on the other aspect, the issue to do with the land ownership. From my experience from Zimbabwe, I've also noticed that the land ownership from this side is slightly different from my area. And however, the problems are more or less the same in terms of how to articulate issues to do with the gender and other related matters. If we are to do this thing in our region, I think the most important thing is to make sure that we localize the production of the pumps, so that we don't end up having importation of very sophisticated pumps, which might not have the required set of skills for repayment. And also, it's important that the farmers also have to be not only be provided with the pumps, but also there has to be a deliberate stance on market linkage, so that whatever the farmers are producing, they end up having a market for them, and this would enable them to pay for the pumps. Thank you.
Right. The importance of credit, access, and market value chains. That's points very well taken. May I request Marie-Jean Gabriel to say a few words? Mostly around your takeaways and lessons for next phase.
Thank you. What I definitely found was there is definitely a lot of potential for solar in Africa. I saw a lot of initiatives that have been undertaken in Southern Africa, including Tanzania, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. In the in Central Africa, in the DRC, it was mentioned. In West Africa, that there was initiatives in Ghana, Senegal, and Nigeria, and in East Africa, in Ethiopia and Tanzania. And there's definitely value for it in terms of the fact that of the problems that we have in terms of energy generation. And our expansion, we have the biggest expansion for irrigation in the continent. So the takeaway that I found is the technical aspects. The installation is a challenge in many of African countries, and the O&M will probably be a challenge. So we'll need to look at the training of technicians to undertake that. The financial aspects, the initial stages of implementation is very, very costly because we have to import. And we will need to look at different aspects of financial models to ensure that they are accessible to our farmers. Then government support is also very critical in terms of this. I see Ethiopia and Senegal have ensured that the mechanization and renewable energy technology is not taxed. In South Africa, it's been utilized mainly by commercial farmers. So we incentivize the use of solar panels, as well as incentivize the fact that they're contributing to the grid. The other thing that we do is, because we really have strict and stringent environmental laws, our Water Act is very airtight. We ensure that any solar initiative is fast-tracked with the forum that is run from our presidency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie-Jean. I think one of the issues that also came out was when you have various environmental and other laws that prevent you from solarizing in certain parts because of conservation rules, then how do you go ahead? So I think that was a lot of the issues that we had not quite discussed in depth, but something I think that's worthy of investigation. That how and it's also because one of the concerns that was also expressed, I think yesterday, Nulka's presentation, was a lot of the solarization in Indian context may be happening in places that is displacing some of the poorest and in some of the most environmentally fragile lands. So on the other hand, the South Africa case is that those lands are protected, and therefore, solar cannot be installed. So I think there's an interesting angle there to explore. May I now request Mr. P.C. Sharma from ISA, where your particular mandate indeed is to promote the South-South cooperation and solar in Africa.
Yes, thank you. So the key takeaways, as far as I'm concerned, what I have observed, and that any program should start with policy formulation by the governments. And in the policy formulation, government need to be stakeholders. They should incentivize, they should have a plan. What I have observed, especially in African countries, the policy framework for deployment of solar water pumping system is not there. They should have some specific schemes unless and until it's there in their own plans, I think scaling up will not be possible. Although the knowledge sharing by starting with some pilot projects, that is important. But along with these pilot projects, capacity building, as many of the speakers, although I have attended 3-4 sessions, but this issue of capacity gap is very huge. Right from it's not that few persons sitting in the ministry can deploy. So we need capacity at the level of technicians, engineers, farmers, and all other stakeholders working on the ground. I think that we should focus on the right capacity, although that is also one of the priority areas for ISA also. Whenever we start engaging with the country, we ask for the capacity, and we provide that capacity building program for bankers, for technicians, for engineers, and policy makers. So we need trained policy makers also who understand the importance of SIP for food security. That is also last year, the food security was one of the issue in the African forum. And for ISA, last year we had a regional meeting. Almost 44 of the 54 countries participated. All were asking for the capacity building support. So that is, I think, very, very critical. And from this forum also, that came out to be one of the key issues. Of course, financial modeling is very important. Everybody is asking for the finances, but what should be the model? Even in India, different states, they are having different policies. Although as a policy matter, Government of India provides 30% subsidy, but rest of the modeling is done by the states. So somewhere they are providing 30%, 40% is the farmer, somewhere it's 75% subsidy, 25% from the private sector, or providing soft loans. Of course, countries can decide as per their local conditions. And other than policy, whenever we formulate a scheme, we should take care of the whole range, beginning from policy right up to the O&M. Like many speakers were discussing about that there are off-grid deployment of solar products, but the functionality is very low. Somebody was saying 50%. Last year I went to Uganda. The issue came up that it's not a very big country. 90,000 off-grid deployment, they are not working. And the issue was that there is no technician. And from my own experience in the last 30 years, I have been implementation. There is a defect of say one fuse only. It doesn't cost less than 1 rupee, but the farmer will say, or the user will say, solar doesn't work. It's not so. I know solar, all solar technology like water pump, they are very reliable system. Of course, even if one technician is in the area, he can look after the whole system. So the issue is very small, but it comes out to be very big if you don't have. So it's not that we need more of engineers or so, but at the ground level, we should have technician, trained technician. They create awareness, and seen is to be believed. That creates a lot of awareness and deployment and involvement of private sector was pointed out. Of course, governments, every government, they have limits for the subsidy. Unless and until the private sector is involved, we cannot scale up the deployment of SIPs or any other technology. So important role of financial modeling and involvement of private sector, how they are webbed into that financial modeling, that will be important. And of course, I have pointed out the standards and specifications. There is no set standards and specification that can be done through South-South cooperation. I have been sharing these standards and specifications, adding used by MNRE, Government of India. Those are quite good standards. And during interaction like in South Africa, the conditions are similar to what they are in India. If a pump is successful, and that was when we did this, you were mentioning in the for 22 countries, the aggregation of 272,000 solar pumps. So even during personal discussions and deliberation with the stakeholders, when we were, all countries were mentioning there are no national standards for solar water pumping system. And if it works in India, it will work for in Africa only. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. I think this is something we are also finding, that the importance of training, capacity building, and regular repair and maintenance. Again, small amounts, but a big impact. So some of the work that we are doing in Gujarat now is training farmers who have already signed on to Sky, and they are almost always telling us that why did this training not take place at the beginning of the implementation? So I think not making enough investment for training at the very beginning is kind of proves to be much more costlier in the long run, because then your utilization and everything is much lower.
Well, ultimately, it's going to end up in the implementation at the ground level. Whatever, even if you formulate good policies, even if you are providing all financing modeling and all, unless until there are things happen actually on the ground.
True, true. So, Mr. Pavel, may I ask you to quickly share the IDCOL team has been very deeply involved with our work in Bangladesh. So please share your, insights from these 2 days of the meeting.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank IWMI and SDC for organizing this event. I mean, we have been working from IDCOL side, we have been working on solar irrigation since 2010 or 11. And this is probably the biggest workshop I've been participating, which focuses only on solar irrigation. Every time I had huge experience in participating at workshops in different areas, different countries, but there solar irrigation is a small part of the total conference. So big thanks to actually IWMI and SDC. In these 2 days, actually, we had very good actually learning of different models, practice in different parts of the world. Particularly, I was keen to actually learn the model of Sky model and also other models followed in India, and actually it was discussed in detail here. So it's a very good learning for us. I'm sure my team has learned a lot, and which will be actually helpful for actually restructuring or improving our model. So there is one aspect I must say. So we sure, I mean, we have seen from presentation, and also we know from our experience that capacity utilization of our pump is very low. I mean, and we are trying to actually improve that. We want to actually, my colleague today presented in a session about the grid integration of solar, and we are working also with IWMI. So, but still, it requires additional cost, and also it requires higher amount of tariff from the government. Otherwise, this is not possible. And also discoms are not interested because their irrigation tariff is lowest. So if they want to increase that, it will be difficult for them. So there are some challenge, and also we cannot actually connect all the solar irrigation pumps with the grid because of the distance. And today we, in the last session, I had, the opportunity to learn about the alternate use of solar irrigation pumps. We also tried that in our country, but we could not do much success. We didn't have much success in that. So probably we'll work on that going forward. And also grid integration, we will have a special focus on grid integration going forward. So, and also we learned from these two days discussion that centralized generation is probably better to actually ensure more capacity utilization. But in our case, it's not very easy because we don't have, we have scarcity of land, which is actually abundant in India and elsewhere. So for us, it's very difficult to actually go for few megawatt installation in a particular area. So we we are trying to make it a bit bigger, like we are going for 45 kilowatt peak installations in a particular locations. And also we are following the government rules and regulations, maintaining pump to pump distances to make sure that we're not over depleting the groundwater. So that is very important for us. And we have seen from our experience also from the study that our irrigation pumps are not actually, affecting the groundwater. So we want to work on that more. And also subsidies, another topic we discussed. Different model has different subsidies, but still subsidy is very high. And our plan is to actually reduce the subsidy going forward. But because of recent, devaluation of Taka against US dollar, we could not actually reduce the price of solar irrigation pumps, and that's why we could not reduce the subsidy. Our plan was to phase out subsidy gradually. Like now we are charging 50% of solar, project cost as grant. We are providing grant 50%. Our plan was to make it 40%, then 30%. And if you could get higher tariff, we are negotiating with the government to get higher tariff for green integration, because government is paying other type of manufacturers like HF4 diesel pumps. They are getting very high tariff. Our ground mounted solar projects, they're also getting high tariff. So why not solar irrigation pumps? So if that we can, ensure probably we will have the opportunity to reduce the tariff, because reduce the grant support, because without reducing the grant support, large scale up is very difficult. So we are focusing on that. So these are the areas actually we like to work going forward, because we have a big plan. We only installed 1,500 irrigation pumps with a total capacity of 42 megawatt. But going forward, our plan is to install at least 10,000 irrigation pumps in next couple of years. And we are discussing with different development partners for arranging funding. We had some funding available with us now, so we will go for scaling up. But obviously the learning from these 2 days conference definitely will help us to better shape our program. So
Thank
with
you.
these words, thank you very much.
Thank you. One of the things we are finding is that while the literature does say the centralized generation is more efficient, but we are finding that in utilities in Gujarat that are very well governed, the performance ratio isn't that different from a large scale solar. So the point is that it is still possible to have, similar equivalent performance ratio. So it's not an issue so much of technology, but it's an issue of governance at the end of the day. So I think that we need to reflect that in the literature, because right now that's what exactly it says, that decentralized is, less efficient. So the governments are always kind of thinking that they need to do centralized generation. Thank you so much. Shifiro, we heard from your DG yesterday morning around GGGIS mission, and I know that you guys have been doing a lot of work on solar. So what were your takeaways? Is there anything from this conference that you learned that is useful for the work that you are doing in your country?
Okay, thank you very much. It is really a privilege and also a great opportunity for me and also for my organization to attend this forum. We have learned quite a lot. To put it simply, in relation to solar energy, what I have learned during the last couple of days is we have come a long way, and we have learned many things. We have identified how this technology, how this innovation can be promoted, how it works, and also why it doesn't work. We have identified. So it is not only this, we have to also go a long way going forward to better benefit from the economic as well as social opportunities that this technology offers, especially for smallholder farmers like my country, Ethiopia, and other African and also Southeast Asian countries. So going forward, Global Green Growth Institute, it operates in several countries, currently about 47 countries. and it promotes green economic model and green transition to renewable energy. And also we are promoting climate smart agriculture, of which solar irrigated or solar power irrigation system is considered both as adaptive capacity to be as adaptation measure as well as mitigation measure. We are promoting it because if we transition from diesel to solar, it is mitigation. If we leverage it also to build the resilience of our agriculture, then it becomes both adaptation measures. So we would like to widely promote it, and especially as a neutral government advisor, and also as an intergovernmental as well as international organization that has an opportunity to mobilize climate finance toward this green growth economy globally. I would say we have learned a lot that paves the way for us to move forward. And maybe going forward, we can jointly, of course, with all key stakeholders, it is a collaborative effort. So going forward, we can focus on some of issues that I would like to reflect on it. The first one is maybe supporting countries to have a long-term strategy or roadmap to widely and sustainably promote solar energy technologies or innovations is mandatory, on top of focusing on projects or programs. It should be designed as a strategy in a very comprehensive manner. That is what I would like to work on it going forward as IGG employee, and also in collaboration with you and others. And the other thing, again, public funds as well as donors funds has to be increased in this intervention or this innovation, again, to widely promote it. And also the other thing, I heard this from one of the speakers, and it struck me, we have to follow a value chain approach to scale up this technology. When he says, the speaker, I couldn't catch his name, sorry for that. Not only strengthening the value chain of the energy, but integrating this energy as an input or as a technology to various agricultural value chains. I think that is very important and a plausible approach that we need to follow. The other thing is, of course, it has been said by my colleagues, I will just reiterate it, developing feasible business model is again mandatory, and we need to work more on it. And the other thing, again, I got this also from when one of the speakers was speaking, public-private partnership is not sufficient to promote this technology. I like this statement. So we have to go one step further and make it public-private plus end users partnership. Again, this is, I couldn't catch the name of the speaker, so we have to focus on this. Yes, we all have been promoting public-private partnership when it comes to several investments and the technologies, but we have to also in these aspects uniquely involve, include, make it participatory, make it inclusive, and consider or add one dimension, which is users partnership. Again, this is very important thing. The other thing is more investment in capacity development is still needed, not only at smallholder farmers level, even at our officials level, at government level, country leaders level, and also other experts in the system needs to learn more, needs to understand more, especially collaborative learning, social learning, hands-on learning, and the knowledge management is extremely important. And going forward, we can focus on this. And I think with this, there are also, I also learned several challenges that we can, if we work jointly, address. So in short, I would say the challenges can be dealt with through systemic thinking as well as strategic and partnership. So we can make them possible. So I think we can jointly, if we join on this and strengthen our partnership, we can better benefit from the opportunities that this technology offers as a country and also for smallholder farmers in different parts of the world. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we are almost towards the end of our session. I'll follow this with a vote of thanks. But before this, I wanted to hand over a token of appreciation to all our panelists. I know all of us had a long day with a lot of thought-provoking content, so we are all ready to kind of depart and relax. So I just wanted to end with a vote of thanks, and first starting with all the co-organizers of this two-day event that includes IIT Gandhinagar, IRENA, GGGI, WRI, GIZ, and ISA. I think we pulled this together in a relatively short time. I think planning started as late October or early November. So it was quite a feat to do this all together. So thank you so much for your cooperation. I want to thank all the solar partners, IDCOL, NEA, AEPC, PARC, who joined us online, GeoVNL and Jeremy, and we have had colleagues from each of these to this meeting, and also all online participants. Then I also want to particularly thank our colleagues from IIT's logistic team, Falguni and Anjana. I don't know, you guys need to absolutely stand up, so that people know who you are. And these two ladies literally work day and night, 24 hours to pull this through in the short time. Thank you so much. Then from the IWMI team, amazing work by Shreya. You have been seeing her running around most of the time. Shreya, Punjan, Tanmoy, Nirmal, I don't know if Nirmal is here, Aris and Gurpreet, they have been helping with all the logistics and all of those issues. And they have all put in long hours and went beyond their call of duty to ensure that everything worked and was in place. Then I want to thank all the session custodians and the rapporteurs. Can you just stand up so that we know who you are? Yeah. So all the session custodians and rapporteurs. Because I think each of the session, they kind of coordinated and made sure that all the presentations were in place, everything was working. And finally, I think we would not have been able to navigate it as well as we did without all our volunteers who are all in blue shirt and in the back of the room. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of the volunteers. So I know this is the exam season, but you still spared some time and spend that with us. And thank you so much. So with this, this meeting is officially closed. And so as a logistic housekeeping discussion, there has been a tour arranged around the IIT campus. So there would be a volunteer group. If you want to join that trip, the volunteers will take you around the campus and show some of the interesting things here. Yeah, and if not, if you want to go back to the guest house, that's also fine. And dinner will be served at between 7:30 to 8 o'clock. Tomorrow morning at 8:30, we will again meet at the IIT guest house for the field trip. So see you again tonight. Thank you so much.